Welcome back, everyone, to Voices of the Soul for another deep dive.
Yeah.
And today we're going to be looking at a Reddit post that sparked some pretty intense conversations online.
Oh, yeah.
It's a post from r/relationship advice, and it features a 20-year-old woman who's struggling with her 19-year-old boyfriend's, let's just say, intense focus on her breasts.
Yeah.
We'll be talking about boundaries, consent,
Yeah.
and respect in relationships. It's a topic that so many people can relate to in some way. And it's really important to understand the dynamics at play.
Absolutely. So, to kind of set the stage, the woman in this Reddit post has been with her boyfriend for 3.5 years.
Wow.
And she's repeatedly told him that she's uncomfortable with him, constantly focusing on touching her breasts.
Right. And that's where we see that first red flag. He's not respecting her boundaries, even after she's clearly communicated that.
Yeah. And it gets even more concerning when you see how he responds. He starts resorting to manipulation, saying things like, "You don't love me if you won't let me."
Oh, I remember that. She even quotes him in the post saying, if you loved me, you'd let me.
Exactly. That kind of manipulation. It's a classic tactic abusers use. They try to shift the blame and make their partners question their own feelings and their own right to set boundaries.
So it's not just about someone liking breasts. It's about power and control.
Exactly. He's trying to make her feel guilty for asserting her right to her own body, her own bodily autonomy.
Wow. So we've got a disregard for boundaries and potential emotional manipulation. What are some other red flags we should be looking out for in relationships?
Well, one thing is, it's important to look for patterns of controlling behavior.
Like what?
Does your partner try to dictate who you see, what you wear, how you spend your time?
Oh, or are they constantly checking up on you?
Yeah, monitoring your phone,
Yeah.
your social media. Those are all signs that someone is trying to control you.
Okay, that makes sense. What about when it comes to intimacy?
Healthy intimacy is all about mutual respect,
Right.
open communication and genuine care for your partner's feelings.
I think a lot of people struggle with knowing when something crosses the line from playful teasing to something more serious.
Yeah, that's a common struggle.
Yeah.
And I think it really comes down to how your partner reacts when you communicate your boundaries. If you tell someone you're uncomfortable with something and they respect that and they stop, that shows a willingness to prioritize your feelings.
Right.
But if they ignore your boundaries, try to convince you otherwise, or make you feel bad for speaking up, that's a problem.
This is already so insightful, and we haven't even gotten to the comment section yet. I'm so curious to hear what other Reddit users had to say about this.
Me too. The comments section is always... It's a fascinating mix of different perspectives. Some people were really adamant that the woman should leave the relationship,
Yeah, I saw those comments too.
while others offered alternative interpretations of the boyfriend's behavior.
Like maybe he was just immature or something.
Yeah, exactly.
I love that about these deep dives. It forces us to think critically and consider different viewpoints.
Totally. It's all about expanding our understanding, learning from each other's experiences.
And speaking of learning, if you're finding this deep dive helpful so far, be sure to subscribe to Voices of the Soul.
Yes, and don't forget to check out our YouTube channel, Shauna Pelage, for even more thought-provoking content.
Okay, so getting back to the Reddit post. One of the first things I noticed in the comments was the sheer number of people urging this woman to end the relationship.
Yeah, and many of them were pretty passionate about it.
They were.
They saw the situation as a clear sign of disrespect, like almost a guarantee that things were going to get worse.
Yeah, one commenter wrote, "This has big red flags." Run. He doesn't respect your boundaries. He's using your insecurities against you.
It's a pretty stark warning, but it makes sense.
Yeah.
When you think about the potential for escalation in these situations, what starts as pushing boundaries can turn into something much more serious if it's not addressed.
Right.
It can really escalate quickly.
And that's something we'll talk about more after the break.
And it's important to remember that abuse, it can take many forms. It's not always physical.
Right. Emotional abuse can be just as damaging.
Absolutely. Things like constant put-downs, isolating you from your friends and family, gaslighting, all of those are forms of abuse.
Gaslighting.
Yeah.
That's when someone tries to make you doubt your own sanity.
Yeah, exactly.
It's really messed up.
And in this case, we're seeing elements of that with the boyfriend's guilt-tripping and manipulation. He's trying to make her responsible for his feelings.
And control her behavior.
It can be hard to recognize in the moment.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Start to question yourself.
Right.
Think maybe you're being too sensitive.
Right. Or that you're in the wrong somehow.
And that's what abusers want.
Exactly. They want you to doubt yourself.
Yeah.
To depend on them.
So what can someone do if they think they're in a situation like this?
Well, The first step is to acknowledge what's happening.
Which can be really tough.
Yeah, it can be really tough, especially if you love the person.
You make excuses for their behavior.
Right. But you have to be honest with yourself.
And then what?
Reach out for help.
Like, talk to a friend. Yeah, a friend, a family member, a therapist. Call a hotline. There are people who want to help you. You don't have to go through this alone.
It's so important to remember that you're not alone. There is help.
Yeah, and sometimes leaving the relationship is the best thing you can do. The safest thing.
But that's so hard.
It is hard, but your safety and well-being have to come first.
Okay, so we've talked about the people who think this woman should leave, but there were other comments too. Some people thought maybe the boyfriend was just immature or insecure.
Yeah, and that's possible. He might not have the experience or the emotional maturity to understand how hurtful his actions are.
One commenter said, he's 19, he's literally a child. This doesn't excuse his behavior, but he needs to grow up.
And they also said, you have to decide if you want to wait around for that to happen.
It made me think about how people are at different stages of emotional development.
Right, it doesn't make his behavior okay.
No, of course not.
But it suggests that he might be able to learn and change with time and guidance.
But should she be the one to teach him?
That's a good question. It's not her job to fix him or put up with bad behavior hoping he'll change. She deserves respect and safety.
There were also some comments that focused on communication.
Oh, yeah. A lot of people were saying she needs to sit down with her boyfriend and have an honest conversation about her feelings and boundaries.
Communication is important, but is it enough?
That's the thing. Communication alone. It doesn't always solve the problem. It takes two people who are willing to work on the relationship.
One commenter said, you need to tell him in no uncertain terms that his behavior is unacceptable. And if he can't respect your boundaries, you need to walk away.
I think that's really good advice. Being clear about your boundaries and what will happen if they're not respected.
Like those comments about boundaries without consequences.
Yeah. One person said, boundary comes with consequences. If he keeps pushing after that, then he's made his choice.
It shows that boundaries aren't just suggestions.
Right. They're essential.
Yeah.
They protect us.
Maybe this is a good place to remind our listeners. If you need to set boundaries or leave a relationship, there is help available. Don't be afraid to reach out.
Absolutely. You don't have to go through this alone.
So going back to those Reddit comments, one thing that really struck me was how the thread reflected kind of these larger societal attitudes about women's bodies and consent.
Yeah, that was really interesting to see.
There were some comments that almost seemed to blame the woman for her boyfriend's behavior.
Like it was her fault somehow.
Yeah, one person wrote, it's normal for guys to be attracted to breasts. Maybe you should just try to be more understanding.
Which is just, ugh.
I know. It's victim blaming, pure and simple.
It's the idea that women are responsible for men's behavior.
Yeah.
That they should just put up with whatever their partners do.
It's like saying men can't control themselves.
And that women should just accept it.
It's so frustrating. It shifts the focus away from the person who's actually responsible for their actions.
Exactly. Instead of holding him accountable, it puts the burden on her to manage his feelings, to change her behavior.
There was even one comment that said she was overreacting.
And that she should just get used to it.
It's dismissive. It's invalidating. It minimizes her experience.
It's like saying unwanted advances from men are just something women have to deal with.
It feels like we have so far to go when it comes to consent and respect in relationships.
We do, but these conversations are important.
Challenging these harmful norms.
It's not about shaming men. It's about promoting a culture where everyone understands consent, respects bodily autonomy. These comments, as problematic as they were, they also reflect a bigger societal issue.
Right. These attitudes don't just come from nowhere.
Yeah, they're rooted in deeply ingrained beliefs about gender roles and power dynamics.
We live in a society where men are often taught to be assertive, to go after what they want.
While women are taught to be passive and accommodating.
And that can create a really unhealthy dynamic.
Where men feel entitled and women are afraid to speak up.
It all comes back to education and awareness.
We need to be having these conversations with young people, boys and girls, about healthy relationships, consent, respect.
It's about raising a generation that understands that consent isn't just a legal thing.
It's a fundamental part of healthy relationships.
This deep dive has really got me thinking about how much these societal norms influence our own relationships.
Me too. It makes you realize we all have a role to play in changing things.
Speaking of, we're committed to creating a space here at Voices of the Soul where we can have these important conversations. So if you're enjoying this deep dive and want to hear more, be sure to subscribe to our podcast and leave us a review.
Yes. And don't forget to check out our YouTube channel, Shauna Pelage. We have tons of videos exploring all kinds of topics.
Okay, now back to the Reddit post.
Yeah.
As we go further into the comments, we see a shift. More and more people are offering support and encouragement to the woman.
Yeah, people reminding her that she deserves to be in a relationship where she feels loved and respected.
One commenter wrote, "It's not okay for him to treat you like this. You deserve to be with someone who values you for who you are, not just for your body."
And another person added, "Please know that you're not alone. Many women have experienced this. It's not your fault. You deserve to be treated with dignity and respect."
It's like these comments offer a sense of solidarity validation.
Yeah, they let her know she's not overreacting. Her feelings are valid.
And that she can expect more.
More from her partner, more from her relationships.
It's really empowering.
Reminding her she has the strength, the right to choose what's best for her.
There's a lot of self-love and self-respect in those comments.
When you value yourself, you don't put up with disrespect.
A lot of the comments also offered advice on how to handle the situation.
Like setting clear boundaries.
Communicating her expectation.
And being ready to walk away if he doesn't change.
One commenter even suggested therapy.
Yeah. They said therapy can be a valuable tool for understanding relationship dynamics, learning healthy communication skills, and setting boundaries.
Therapy can be so helpful. It gives you a safe space to talk about things.
To develop strategies for dealing with challenging situations.
I think a lot of people are afraid of therapy. They think it means something's wrong with them.
But it actually shows strength.
It's a commitment to personal growth.
It's an investment in yourself.
Learning new skills. Relating to yourself and others in a healthier way.
I'm glad we're talking about this because there's still such a stigma around mental health.
We need to normalize it. Everyone needs help sometimes.
Absolutely. There's no shame in asking for support.
So, we've talked about the red flags, the different perspectives in the comments. What are some key takeaways for our listeners?
Well, I think the most important thing is that everyone deserves to be in a relationship where they feel safe, respected, and loved.
And if those things are missing,
it's time to reevaluate, even if you've been together for a long time.
We also have to remember that abuse can be subtle.
Emotional manipulation, gaslighting, controlling behavior, all of those are abuse.
And we all need to be aware of those societal norms that contribute to these problems.
And challenge them.
Communication is so important in any relationship, but it's not always enough.
If someone keeps disrespecting your boundaries, hurting you, you have the right to walk away.
And finally, remember you're not alone.
There are people who care. There are resources to help you. Friends, family, therapists, hotlines.
This deep dive has really been eye-opening. It's shown how complex relationships can be and how important consent boundaries and respect are.
It's given us a lot to think about.
As individuals and as a society.
It's also a reminder that these conversations are important. We all have a role to play in creating a culture where everyone feels safe and respected in their relationships.
Now, before we wrap up, there's one more thing we need to talk about from the Reddit post. The woman mentioned how her boyfriend's behavior has started to affect their sex life.
Oh, right. She said sex has started to feel like a chore, an obligation.
Because of his pressure and guilt tripping.
It raises a really important point, the difference between healthy sexual expression and coercion.
It can be hard to see the line sometimes.
Especially in a long-term relationship.
But true intimacy has to be based on mutual respect, open communication, understanding your partner's needs and desires.
When someone disregards boundaries and uses manipulation, it creates a toxic dynamic.
It's about power. And it can be so damaging.
And that's where those comments about leaving the relationship make even more sense.
People were worried about her.
They could see how this situation could escalate, how it could hurt her in the long run.
Sometimes walking away is the healthiest choice.
Even if it's painful at first.
You deserve to be in a relationship where you feel safe, respected, and loved. And if you don't, maybe it's time to move on.
Absolutely. That's such an important message.
Now, before we say goodbye, we want to leave you with one final thought.
How can we, as individuals and as a society, create a culture where consent is truly understood, respected, and practiced in all our relationships?
It's something to think about as you go about your day.
We hope this deep dive has given you some new insights and maybe even inspired you to take action in your own life.
Thanks for joining us.
Yeah.
And be sure to tune in next time for another deep dive.
And don't forget to subscribe to Voices of the Soul and check out our YouTube channel, Shauna Pelage, for even more great content. Until next time.
You know, it's really hard to leave a relationship sometimes, even when you know it's not good for you.
Yeah, you get caught up in, like, the history, the memories.
The love.
Right? And you tell yourself it'll get better, even when all the signs are saying, run.
Those comments from other people.
Yeah.
They were like a wake-up call for her.
Yeah, it was like they were saying, hey, you deserve more than this.
One person said, you deserve to be with someone who makes you feel good about yourself, not someone who makes you feel like you're always disappointing them.
That's so powerful. Right.
It's like, choose people who lift you up, not tear you down.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it made me think we need to pay attention to the messages we get from our relationships.
What do you mean?
Like, are you always questioning yourself, feeling anxious around your partner, always drained and exhausted?
Those are bad signs.
Yeah, they're signs that something isn't right.
And that you have a choice.
You don't have to stay in a situation that's hurting you.
Sometimes, the best thing you can do for yourself is walk away.
It's hard, but sometimes it's necessary.
This whole Reddit thread, it really blew up.
It did, didn't it?
It shows how many people relate to this.
These issues, consent, boundaries, respect, they're universal.
We all deal with them in our relationships, whether we realize it or not.
That's why I love these deep dives. They get us talking about these things.
Learning from each other, challenging the norms.
Creating a culture of awareness and respect.
So, what's one final thought you want to leave our listeners with?
I'd say, think about your own relationships. Ask yourself, am I being treated with respect? Do my boundaries feel safe? Can I be myself?
And if the answer to any of those is no,
it might be time for some tough conversations.
or maybe even time to walk away.
You're not alone in this. There's help out there.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We hope it's given you something to think about.
Remember, if you like this episode, subscribe to Voices of the Soul.
And find us on YouTube at Shauna Pelage.
Take care, everyone.